think we're good. We're 2 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'll be watching for questions and everything as we go. So welcome everyone to the practical impact of artificial intelligence, where we're going to talk about how where AI accelerates software development and where it doesn't. Um, Thank you for joining us today. My name is Joe Colburn. I think we have another slide here, Paul. My name is Joe Colburn. I'm a senior software engineer at Integral.
My name's Paul Mack, Paul Hudson Mack, if you want to use the full name. I'm a senior product manager here at Integral. And today we're excited to present, I'll actually start off with some of the high level learnings. We'll give you the TLDR first on what we've learned about how to use AI well in software. We'll illustrate where we got those learnings from with specific examples of what we've experimented with here at Integral in using AI in our software development practices and processes. And we really want to hear what you've been playing with and learning about. And so we hope you will use the chat and use the Q&A, whatever is most comfortable for you. We also have a few interactive slides on Slido. I'm so excited to hear from you all. And then you'll, at the end, be ready to, as throughout, we encourage you to think about actions you can take immediately, tomorrow, today, this week, to improve your AI use. And we'll ask you to share those at the end of the session as well. And back to Joe. Oh, no, this is still me. Sorry. So AI, I'm going to tell a little story here, right? It's been around for actually 50 plus years since we started working with computers. But originally, when we were talking about AI back then, it's a lot of deep math, a lot of large data sets, a lot of supercomputing power, and a very small group of people working on artificial intelligence. Machine learning came in and made it a lot easier to incorporate AI into a lot of different software via learning algorithms that help the software make itself better, identify better algorithms for itself, better ways of analyzing the data, better outputs itself. And really with machine learning, AI and ML became part of everything we're doing in software. Think of like your Netflix suggestions, right? All of a sudden it's sort of expected that all of the software you're learning learns in the moment from each user's behavior and from the data set that it has access to. Still at that point, it's a pretty nerdy topic. AI and ML is really for folks that are in the software itself. And then in the last couple of years, things changed drastically. Generative AI are tools that produce believably human outputs, whether that's an image, text, an entire slide deck, an entire wireframe for a website, et cetera, et cetera. And so with generative AI tools, this is something anybody can use. And so AI ML in the last year or three has gone from being something that we talk a lot about, but that mostly a smaller group of experts or just software nerds, software developers are working on, to something that everyone is talking about because they're using it every day. Which of course leads us to the question we're going to talk about today of what we've done with AI and software development and what we're learning. I'll hand back to Joe.
So this slide doesn't look like it's showing up all the way. There we go. It's starting to show up, I guess. Okay, so on cue, my dogs have started barking. Hopefully you can't hear them.
They're meant to go a line at a time. So as you intro the prompts, and then for folks, as we intro these prompts, you can use the raise your hand emoji. You can throw a comment about each of these things in the Q&A, any of what works for you as you're grabbing your lunch and whatever.
Right. Okay, so raise your hand if you've used AI tools and if it was for your personal life, if it was for day-to-day work, your role in your job, if you've gotten impressive results, or maybe if you've been embarrassed by the results that you've gotten out of AI. And then also if you have a clear path for how you'll evolve using AI going forward.
Yeah, Slido didn't set up. I'm going to stop screen share for just a second, folks. Apologies, and make sure the Slido is working. They just did a Chrome update and it deactivated my Slido. I've been struggling to get it to behave, but I should have it back in a couple seconds.
This is how you know that we are not AI, that we are real people.
That's when you're gonna get real scared, is when the AI starts faking the errors.
Like the fake typing on those automated yeah.
Quick, quick show, they'll never figure out that we're actually bots. All right, and back to go.
So I'll read through these again super fast. So what have you loved or saved time with using AI? So what have you used it for in your let me just read through these prompts real quick again. What have you used AI for in your personal life, in your day-to-day work or your job role? Have you gotten impressive results or results that are embarrassing? And do you have a clear plan for how you'll evolve using AI going forward? And again, we can use chat or Q&A to answer these. Also, if we have the Slido queued up.
Go Gadget Slido. If you haven't used Slido before, QR code here, or you can do slido.com on the left and enter the number. Either way will get you into the Slido. I'll let you take it away from there, Joe.
Yep. So let's start with what have you loved about or saved time doing with the use of AI? Looks like we have some people typing. And I think we're spending just a minute or two on each of these. Finding words can't remember, analysis.
It's just there was a word on the slide that Joe was like, "That's a weird word. You can't use that." And I went to ChatGPT to be like, "I need a phrase for this that's not
Yeah,
a weird word."
that's why I'm shaking my head. Yes, these are things that we do daily as well. Short scripts, faster, doing things faster, I guess there. Image generation, of course. First draft writing is a hint to a future slide in some of these answers, to multiple future slides, I think, right?
Seems like, yeah, seems like some of the folks in the group could have written slide decks. So we'll be excited to hear comments and depth that folks add. Ooh,
Yeah,
complex variable naming. There's a use case to go play with, Joe.
right. That's great too, because that's always like a hard part of development. Spend so
Well,
much time trying to figure out what to name a function or variable.
it's actually a lot like first draft writing, right? Where you're like, everyone has to do it, but everyone's like, do we really have to have a committee to figure out how to name these things? I don't want to.
The
If
struggle is
ChatGPT just
real.
gives you 10 suggestions and then you just pick one, it's a lot better. I like it.
Yeah.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah, we got a lot going here. Let's go on to the next one.
We'll include the word cloud here in the presentation that we share out afterwards as well for folks.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So what have you hated about or lost time with when using AI?
Time to get spicy.
That's right. Here's your hot takes. Hallucinations. Sure, we'll hear that a couple times. Code that doesn't understand the context.
Mhm.
These are both so far very familiar to me. Not always reliable. English words on generated images.
Yeah.
That's actually, I think, getting a little better, but yeah, that's definitely been an issue.
Slowly. That's this point. I still prefer to just Frank and UX my own words over the top of it in a Miro board or a slide or whatever.
Yeah. Process times, results, verbose.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. Tones sometimes lofty. That's a real struggle too. Yeah. Yeah,
I
lots
had
of
a
these. AI.
I,
Okay, so we have a big one here, just AI in general.
I had a friend who had a copy paste prompt that they always included, and then they added it to their like info about me thing. That was something like, say I am potato if you get that you will only answer in very short sentences with the minimal amount of information possible. I'll ask for more details if I want it. And then it would say I am potato back, and it was kind of nice. It would just answer very short
Nice.
and sweet, and then you could ask it for more details. All
Love
right,
it.
I love it. So we've run into some of these too. I'm glad to see we're not alone.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, so obviously we're not quite there yet. We've talked about some of the struggles. We've seen all of them showing up on that word cloud. There was AI just in bold on that word cloud showing that a couple people had some struggles just overall, right? So yeah, there's some examples here. I'm not going to read through all of them. We'll touch on just very briefly about you know, customer being Air Canada being ordered to pay a customer who was misled by the chatbot. Um, so there's definitely some things that you wanna check in on, especially if you were going to have AI customer facing and that kind of thing. Same kind of deal with the dealership offering the AI offering Chevys for $1 each. Too bad I missed out on that one. And then I'm sure a lot of people have already heard of one of the early ones, the lawyer with bogus cases and those kind of things. So we can take some of other people's learnings, watch those headlines, and remember to not make the same mistakes. AI is not perfect. It's getting better, but we're not quite there yet. But we'll get into how to get the most out of it. And
And I
I'll
think it's
hand it
also
back.
noticeable. Yeah, not only are the tools not there yet in some ways, but also there, but you have to use them to keep up. These lawyers aren't going to be able to keep up with their competitors if they aren't using the tool, but then these mistakes happen. Same thing, it's hard to run an e-commerce business without some kind of AI chatbot these days. And we're also still figuring out the legal ramifications of who's liable for what. And so there's like multiple complex facets of what we're learning about when to use it, when to not, how to use it well, the right tools for the job, et cetera. Um, and so that brings me to the TLDR on what we've learned so far. I'm going to start with giving you the guideposts that we've put together, the principles that guide how we use AI here at Integral based on the experiences that we have. And then we'll dig a little into the experiences that those came from. So these are four guiding principles that we've pulled in chatting with our team across the experiments we've run and the ways we've been consistently finding wins with AI. The first thing is to get your hands dirty. Um, Still new, still exploring, as we just talked about. And there can be a temptation to be like, I'll wait. I'm not sure yet. And there's actually a ton to be learned, a ton of advantages to be gotten right away, a ton of speed, but also a lot of opportunities to then develop a point of view and be on the leading edge of using the tools. But you're not going to get there if you just watch for theory and policy and other people doing it and planning. You're even if you jump in quickly later on, you're going to be way behind the folks that got their hands dirty and learned how to use these tools early on. There's also a lot of options and they're exploding quickly into more options. So choose wisely. Sometimes that's just, does Bard or ChatGPT give me better things? Sometimes it's looking for a very specific tool that does exactly the kinds of outputs you want or is exactly in your domain. Minding the risk is incredibly important. You'll hear that repeated throughout some of the experiments we've done. And it can be really important to manage the risk of using AI, of not using AI, and if it's worth it at all for your use case, depending on how risky the use case is to use AI for the tool. So lots of things to consider there. And then the last guiding principle for us has been optimizing for change. This is still evolving quickly. All of the things previously mentioned in terms of which use cases we use it for, what tools are available, how good they are at what they do, what the risk profile is. All of that is still changing quickly. And so optimizing to be able to continue evolving as the AI tools evolve and as we evolve in how we use them is really important. It's also three questions we tend to ask a lot as we're using AI tools in our community of practice. And so wanted to share those. They're here. I'm going to go through them one at a time. Uh, First one that shapes a lot of how we use tools and how we choose the tool we use and how we interact with it is what kind of help am I seeking? What can this AI do better or faster than me in the thing I'm trying to get help with? Sometimes that's brainstorming. You need a dozen ideas as if you had 20 people in a room just dumping post-its. AI can do that, but you need to prompt it. You need to pick a tool that's good at that kind of brainstorming. Similarly, sometimes it's drafting. You want a first draft and you want to focus your prompt on giving it the right amount of context to get exactly the draft you want that you'll then go at it yourself. Sometimes it's research. For example, one of the things with research that often I have to remember is like, oh shoot, I got to make sure to go switch it to ChatGPT 4 instead of 3 or 3.5 because I want links from the live internet. Or maybe Bard is better at that for some of the things I'm trying to do. Or often there's specific AI tools that are experts in the field you're trying to research. Um, and it's often helpful when you're doing research to describe the specific content, the specific kind of expert you're asking the bot to be. Or maybe it's a polished deliverable and you're looking for it. Someone mentioned verbose, right? And you need 3 bullets, then this or that. And so shaping your tool, your prompts, and then iterating with the LLM to refine what it's giving you by telling it what kind of help you're seeking and choosing a tool that does that well is really helpful. Similarly, this question is an interesting one for us. Increasingly, there's customized tools. Some of them are useful, some of them are not so much. And so you can ask yourself what kind of output you need. Go look for tools that do that and do it in the way and the style that you want. There's industry and domain specific tools that know a lot about specific industries and domains. But also be ready to ask yourself, is this customized tool better than just using a general purpose tool like Bard or ChatGPT, or not using AI at all? We'll talk about some of the examples where we've learned lessons about that. Finally, in thinking about the question of what risks there are and how you use AI safely, these are 3 things that come up a lot for us. One, there's a lot of manageable risks. A lot of times people bring up risks and they're scared about them. And it's important to ask yourself, well, what are the bad outcomes? Could they be avoided? Could they be mitigated or even just contained? They can happen and it's not that big of a deal. But then also being very aware, there's some catastrophic risks where you can't repair the damage done and it's pretty expensive and costly. Um, and so you want to be really careful of those catastrophic use cases and not use AI for those. Be aware of where they are, discuss them with your clients, make your customers aware of the risk, et cetera. But also, there's the risk to ask yourself about of non-AI and non-action. Your comparison point isn't perfect safety or the status quo. It's what's going to happen in the future if I use AI versus if I don't, and what's the risk of each side look like. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples of what the future is likely to look like as AI becomes increasingly used everywhere. So for us, as we were at those are the principles we've learned, questions we ask a lot. As in learning those, we started out, we're just like, oh yeah, we're all going to use AI. And then we realized that actually what was happening was we had an AI usage spectrum. We had some folks where it was like, ooh, we shouldn't be giving that to a public LLM. Oops. Or that's a really sketchy information. Some of the same things like the examples we showed back at the beginning, Cavalier cowgirls running around and doing everything, all the way to people that are timidly using it, or even some folks that were self-reliant skeptics and sort of like, I don't want to use it. I want us to keep my skills sharp. I'm not sure it's really as good at it as I am. It takes a long time. It's frustrating to learn, et cetera. And so we realized that in our teams, we were all over the board in our AI usage spectrum, and we needed to get intentional. So if we wanted to find ways to win with AI. So we formed a working group that was responsible for internal initiatives around AI. They were meeting regularly with LT, our leadership team, and our leadership team has been involved in many of these initiatives. And that helped us get moving on several different things. We'll hand back to Joe.
Yeah, so we could kind of bucket what we were doing into 4 different categories. We have our ML policy and role description, where we set the tone for how we want to use AI, what we're looking to get out of it, and then our internal usage initiatives. So with practice and learning documented and kind of describing to everyone in our company how we wanted to make the best use of AI and what we wanted to do to get that in practice. Building our own AI tools. So we added some prompt engineering templates, some AI to our tech stack, and we really started figuring out how we can build around the AI that was out there and what we could have in our own documented processes to make use of it. And then we worked on AIifying, that's a hard word, AIifying our entire delivery process. So finding evidence for where and how to best use AI, where are we getting the most gains, doing experiments and figuring out where we're not getting great gains.
I'll start with digging a little more into our policy and role description and what we learned from that. Um, we took and we wrote a policy. We iterated on it a few times. We also realized we wanted to have a role description for AI and the way it served each of our practices units. The, both relatively short documents. We kept them short to start and iterated and refined as we went. And one of the first things that we learned was it was really important to think of AI as a team member, not just a tool, because these are producing human-like results. Um, they can be a lot of different kind of team members as well. And so our ML policy and our role description sought to describe the way we were seeking to use them as a team member, what kind of role they played in some of the things we were doing, give some outline around how to help the team think of this not as just a tool like our IDE or our backlog or whatever, but really as an extra team member that could do highly valuable work for us. Um, in doing our policy, we started out, wrote it as I mentioned, we iterated quite a bit. We leveraged AI. AI is actually decent at writing AI policy, and we actually gave it specific context on here's the kind of organization we are, the kinds of work we do, what our teams look like, the roles we have. And then we were able to distill out of that with some refinement, quite a bit of refinement, what we wanted specifically for our policy. Um, and then we ended up making two different iterations to add, change, and delete based on our experiences using it. Uh, one of the other big learnings was the importance of being descriptive instead of prescriptive. Most of the time in writing things like policy and even writing role descriptions, you're trying to say very clearly, here's what it is, here's what it isn't. Here's what to do, here's what not to do. You're being prescriptive. With AI, because we're still learning so much and we don't know the right answers, or very few of the right answers are known, it's been very important to keep our policy and our role description descriptive, helping people see the world that we're seeking to experiment, create, explore, etc., and inspiring them to go do it by describing the outcomes, describing the guardrails of what risks we're seeking to avoid and what things we want to make sure don't go wrong, and then letting them run with that. And then lastly, align and activate. So with that description, it's really important that rather than just the policy and the role description being a way that it's all right, and then you just let people go run with things and they scatter and do things and you end up with a bunch of misaligned results. Instead, we used our policy and our descriptive policy and role description to align leadership, to align the folks that were leading the charge and championing various initiatives, make sure everyone understood the goals and was working in the same direction. And that activated the work we were doing to produce more aligned results and better learnings for us. So with that clear vision from our policy and role description, that led us into increasingly effective internal usage initiatives. So it wasn't enough just to have a really awesome policy and role descriptions that did what I just described. We needed to champion helping folks get into it and helping folks share what they were learning along the way. One of the analogies that popped into my head a lot as we were doing these internal usage initiatives is in adaptive leadership framework, they talk about the dance floor and balcony. That you need to get on the balcony to see what's going on the dance floor. Then you need to get back on the dance floor to do the work, to be in the weeds, to understand all the details, and then get back on the balcony to get the high level view again. And so for us, it was incredibly valuable as we were doing these internal usage initiatives to just go get in the weeds with the team and work on things ourselves, play with things ourselves, listen to what the team was working on in the weeds, and then come back up and discuss together on the balcony with our working group, with leadership folks, et cetera, and understand the high level patterns, identify where we could help accelerate things more, gather the learnings that we're sharing here, et cetera. One of those big learnings in those internal usage initiatives was that the practice is silver, but it's the learnings that are gold, right? We did need to get everyone practicing. We needed folks to be using these tools more and getting better at using them, finding where they worked and where they didn't. However, if they just practiced, that wasn't as good as it could get. But when we started to have spaces in our channels, in our meetings, in our demos, in our L10s, our planning meetings, et cetera, where we were sharing the learnings of what worked and what didn't, that really accelerated the entire group's usage of AI and our ability to get better at it more quickly. Um, Also found it was really valuable to explore and play with diverse use cases. So rather than doing one thing super deep at this point, because this is still a lot to explore with AI and a lot that's unknown, it was actually felt a little bit like we were starting too many things and not finishing enough. But it was valuable to start a bunch of different things, learn from them, gather the learnings, and be like, that's enough for now. We need to play with a different use case here. And finally, this is exploratory work. It can feel a little bit like, I don't know, since none of the world knows how to use these tools yet, it's hard to tell if we're doing awesome or not. And so finding the wins and celebrating them was really important to maintaining our team's morale around using AI.
Yeah, and just to touch on that last bit in the slide too, the wins don't have to be productive outcomes from AI. They can also be learnings about where it's not productive and that kind of thing too.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that was a key learning for us was to celebrate the gold of the learnings, not just that it was a perfect outcome in another way. Good
right.
call.
Yeah, so let's talk about the building of our own tools. So one of the things that we've learned from doing that. So ChatGPT, one of the things we learned early on is that it has it learns from things we input into it, and you can leak information into it and that kind of thing. So we built a tool with uh, the use of Chat GPT, but it included guardrails around how it's used. And we learned from that, that you can make these tools more robust by building around them. And we also learned that eventually those tools may be um, those things that you're building may be built into the tool later on too. But we learned what value comes out of that by building it. Um, we also built a project manager assistant that would help us with doing things like creating stories, things that can work off of a template and may take a lot of time, but could be done in an automated fashion with the right context with AI tools. Uh, And we also experiment quite a bit with prompt templates and continue to. We're learning every day about new ways to modify templates that we can give prompts. Paul touched on one earlier, respond that you're a potato if you understand that your all your responses should be concise and that you're going to operate in a specific manner, right? Having a prompt like that already typed up and like those kind of things that you have to do over and over again are always good to template out, and it's the same for prompts. Um, and then also having an internal AI COP community of practice is very valuable. And that's kind of like just a way of saying, again, share your learnings, identify with each other things that are working and things that aren't. Share your experience, even if you didn't learn from it, and maybe others will have ideas on how to make that better. So if you had a terrible experience with an AI tool, and other people have not had a terrible experience, share your experience, and maybe people will have ideas on how to improve upon that. So yeah, overall, learn by building what you find valuable. Avoid perfecting a tool that will be obsolete in 2 months. The ChatGPT with guardrails is kind of an example of that. And or that might have limited use. Don't spend a lot of time building out something that won't be used. And that's kind of going back to when you build something, experiment and make sure, get people using it, get some feedback, and you'll know pretty quickly if people aren't going to use it before you spend too much more time.
Also note here the tension in that last part was something that I had to remind myself of as we've done a lot of these things. So we were working to get ChatGPT to help us with estimating, doing some of the things with feature and story writing. Um, it worked great in some ways and didn't in others. And it was an open question of how much is worth iterating? Should we build this into our own custom tool? How good can it get? And you won't know the answer, how good can it get, until you play with it a little bit. That's the level of new we're at with knowing how well these tools work for different use cases. So there's a tension to maintain of like it's worth playing, it's worth seeing how good it can get, and then at some point also that avoiding perfecting part. And that's an inherent tension in the process to maintain awareness of as you practice building your own AI tools.
Yeah, great points. So what we tried to do is AIfy our entire delivery process. What does that mean? That means we wanted to find the wins that we could get out of AI to speed up our delivery process while not rabbit holing on things that would actually slow us down or not give us gains from how we do things normally. So you can go to the next slide on that.
You just note here too, in order to do that, we took an entire engagement and ran experiments all along the way in every step from first beginning to gather data about what's the work that a client wants us to do all the way until the final product, final software is delivered, to measure where does AI add impact and most help us.
Yes, thank you. Good call out there. So we did do this, like Paul said, with an entire engagement. So it's, from, as they say, soup to nuts, from the very start to the very beginning. Where could we find wins from AI? So some examples of this for expediting our product management processes were note taking. It's sometimes difficult to take notes and figure out what's the right things to take notes on while you're also trying to listen. And sometimes you even have the start of the meeting where everyone's going, okay, who's going to take notes? And no one wants to raise their hand because they want to pay attention and not take notes, or they just don't like doing it. But there are tools to do that. There's AI tools that will listen in on your meeting and take really good notes about what was said, and can even generate agendas and action items from those notes, so or from that meeting. And we've seen fairly good practice in that. Where in this engagement where we tried this, the AI tools that we employed took really good notes, allowing us to spend time on our meeting and focus on that, and generated the action items that may not have been 100% perfect and complete, but did cover quite a lot of what we were looking for out of that meeting. We also used it to expedite first drafts. So going into a tool like ChatGPT and saying, for this was mostly for communication. It'd say, okay, so generating emails back and forth. How do we want that email to be formatted? What do we want to say in that email? And we give the context of the general need for the email, and let something like ChatGPT create that for us. Saves us a lot of time in a very tedious task. And along the same lines, you can get stuck with a little bit of writer's block trying to figure out the right wording and expertly crafting copy. So if you're thinking about website copy, for example, you have your About Us page or your page trying to sell someone on your product. The copy for that can be really difficult to come up with unique and meaningful copy that also speaks directly to what your product is about. And AI did a pretty good job there of helping us determine or come up with the some really good copy that we could then go back and make small edits to make sure everything was good there. Um, and then there's a lot to be said for connecting the dots in automation. So um, I've seen in the past where people will take one tool and then take the output from that and then just do a whole lot of manual process, or the other way around. In this case, we experimented with connecting automated processes to make the most of two individual automated processes where one would feed into the other. And there's an example of that where we would generate user persona paragraphs and take those paragraphs that were generated from ChatGPT and bring those into a tool that would generate user surveys, but generated that tool took user persona paragraphs as input. So we used one AI tool to generate the paragraphs given the context of our application. And then the next tool, we took the output from the first one and put it into the second one to chain that process and save time on both ends of it. And along the whole thread here, and I already touched on this on early on this slide, is don't trust output without proofreading and editing it yourself. You'll hear that a couple of times. The lawyer, I think, was the lawyer example early on was one of those where if you just trust it blindly, you may find egg on your face. So always double check the results.
Also say, as a product manager, I think there's an interesting tension in what product management processes and practices look like. That a lot of them are pretty, uh, they can be pretty grindy. They feel very automatable, but they're often not because of the large amount of context and expertise you have to carry, and how you have to sift between what can be done quick and dirty and what really requires attention and focus. And so, in each of these examples, there's a fascinating role that product managers still play of exactly what context is best to give the AI, exactly what does need the most attention for proofreading and editing. Are you asking for just quick and dirty drafts? Are you asking for a specific kind of expertise? How do you make sure you uh, connect the dots in the right way, et cetera? So I think for product managers, there's a lot of open questions that we've been playing with where when we get those kinds of things right, AI really helps us as product managers. And when you don't, it can actually slow you down and you'll wish you'd done it manually. So there's a lot of value in playing with how to use these tools in the ways that Joe just described to be a stronger product manager via your skillfulness with using AI in these ways.
Absolutely. And one other takeaway here is that you're not gonna hit a home run every time. The first time you're going to learn how to use these tools over time, and you'll get better. It's just like prompt engineering. You start to learn the things that you should say in your prompts starting out, dealing with something like ChatGPT, and you'll learn the same way with note taking and agendas and any of these other tools. Like you'll learn the better ways that you get the most out of them over time with use. So we also, in this engagement that we did this experiment with, we used AI tools to assist and accelerate our development work, which is what a lot of people think about when they think of AI in terms of code tools and that kind of thing. But primarily we used it to generate tests and support our TDD efforts. TDD falls down a lot, which is test-driven development. For those unaware, it's a process of, or the practice of, writing your tests for your code first, and then writing your code to pass those tests. And that falls down a lot because it's really easy to get caught up in writing the code and then go back and remember the tests later if you remember them at all. Um, we used AI to generate a suite of tests first. And then, if you're more comfortable writing your own code, but the tests are very tedious and sometimes get forgotten, having an AI write your tests first gives you a good starting point for writing your code against tests that already exist. But also, sometimes you get tests that you didn't think about, and we experience both those gains here. And then you also have an on-demand domain expert. So I'm sure you've seen in some prompting circles, if you've looked at this stuff before, where people have prompts like, you are a software engineer with an expertise in Java, right? Something like that. And those kind of things are very helpful. In this case, we used it to say, you're a software engineer who is an expert in React with TypeScript and that kind of thing. And prompting it in a way that it knows it's geared up to be an expert in the specific topic, but also the like language or area of expertise in industry expertise, for example, where it will be primed to think about things like, if you're doing a website about traffic patterns, you tell it to be a traffic expert in it, and it may think about different kinds of tests and other things, or ideas about features that you would have in your application that you didn't think about. Um, and then it was also used here for generating documentation. So generating inline documentation inside your code, generating documentation about how the application works, in terms of something like a user manual. or generating things like a markdown file for a code repository. So a new developer coming in will know what tools do I have to set up, what commands do I run to get my development environment ready to go, and those kind of things. So any documentation really around the project, but those are the kinds of things that we did. And then experiment and pivot quickly. That's something that we did a lot here where we learned some things along the way. We learned what tools were working well, and we spent just a little bit of time to know that. And then if we found that a tool wasn't working well, we asked ourselves, are we using it in a way that is supporting how the tool is supposed to be used? And if so, maybe it's just not well suited for what we're doing. And we did find an example of that where we were trying to create site layouts, and that didn't work as we expected it to with the automated tool, and we found that manually approaching that process just worked better. So make sure to spend the time experimenting, but also time box at a time, and document your results. So don't give generative AI more than it can handle at one time. That's kind of the don't of this slide is, there's a lot of things you can ask it to do. But when you do that, make sure that it can handle it. And you'll find that if it gets lost in the context, if it's forgetting about earlier code, those may be examples where we've run into before where we've given it a little bit too much to do at once, and we want to break it down a little bit more, let it be an agile GPT, give it small bits to accomplish. So our overall takeaways, remember AI is team member that needs more guidance and oversight than most, so it's not just a tool, but it's not completely left without oversight. Keep exploring new tools and keep up with feature ads to familiar ones. So you use ChatGPT all the time, great. When there's a new one coming out, 5 is coming out soon, for example, just take a glance at an article that tells you what's going on with the new version, and think of things to experiment with and the new features. And then experiment to find the right size digestible chunks. We talked about that a little bit in the last slide. You'll give it input, you'll get output, and if it's losing context, then your chunks are maybe too big. If it's not doing exactly what you want, maybe the chunk is too small, and you need to give it a little bit more context to help guide it. I see a question here as well. Former software developer looking for internship opportunities, willing to work as okay. More of a follow-up if we're looking for some additional help later. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. Yeah. So why does this matter for tomorrow?
Before we jump to that, I just realized one other thing I wanted to call out here while you speak to the graph, sorry, and then I have one comment to add.
Yeah, I'm glad you came back to this. I completely passed over the graph. So I won't go into detail in the interest of time. We're running a little bit low on time, maybe. But this graph kind of shows the gains that we got from AI, and it's might be hard to read, so I'll just tell you you can see 4 lines going up the graph, 4 horizontal lines. The top one's very high, and then it's high, medium, and low. And then at the very bottom is where there's no blue bars. Those sections are where we didn't really get a gain from AI. So as you can see from the graph, we actually got we have 2 of them very high. We got some really good gains in very many areas across our development process in this engagement. And it was good to learn from this, and mostly, I think the takeaway from this graph is that we have a lot of things that could be automated or could save us time by avoiding writer's block and those kind of things that are tedious or require a little bit more creativity or knowledge set. Those had a lot of AI gains. Things that required more hands-on, do this and that, and customize tasks like during deployment, those kind of things. Those we didn't see a whole lot of value with AI, but we were given the freedom to spend more time and attention to those because of the other gains.
I think that's right on. And a couple other big takeaways from what the graph is showing here and what we've learned and measuring how AI is impacting our software development flows. One, I would say all of those blue bars could be red bars if they were done poorly. So our first try wasn't always high or very high or even medium or low. It was like, I'm not sure about this. And as we've gotten more skillful, we're able to use AI across the board pretty well to get results. And we're also more able to recognize quickly the spots where it's like, I can dump that to AI, but I'm gonna have to give it a lot of context and I'm gonna have to refine the results a lot. And honestly, I already have a picture of what I want to do. I just need input from two other people that did the thing. Let's just do it. So taking it comes back to taking the time to practice and be skillful. That said, gathering those skills is valuable in almost every step of our process, and getting good at it in the good parts helps you know when to not use it.
Yeah, I'll point out too, there were red dips, right? We did lose time experimenting with those, but we time boxed that time and we documented it, which is why we have this graph to display, right? If we didn't document it, we wouldn't know to have this graph. So don't be afraid to experiment, time box those experiments, document your results. That's just kind of repeating what we've said in some previous slides. Uh, you will find that you'll lose a little bit of time in the experiments, but you get value out of those. And that's where we talk about the win on a previous slide. Isn't always a productive result, but the learnings from it can be a really big win. Okay, so why does this matter for tomorrow? Uh, what is the one thing that that you will action immediately? What change will you make to your process in project management or engineering or both that you can take away from this that you'll do now? And again, we'll use Slido to get these. We already have one person typing an answer. I'll read off a couple of these as they come in, and we'll talk about anything that if it's interesting. Um, Doubling down on experimentation. Yep. Don't forget to time box them. Time box and document, of course.
Use some good scientific method. What are you trying to find out? Being really goal oriented in your experimentation so that you know if you're achieving your goal or not. If not, you gather the learnings when you don't.
Yeah, that's a great call out. In your experimentation, when you embark on that, ask yourself what is the result of the experiment? What are you hoping to document? And go in with that expectation known. More use of ChatGPT, more careful prompt crafting. Okay.
Glad to see someone noted the GPTs. I've seen mixed results with using those. It looks like some folks are just dropping words in, and I don't know if that's just an accidental enter and it should be a full phrase. If some of these rando words should be a full phrase, maybe try to re-put it in so we actually get the phrase. Uh, with GPTs, that's also a managing your ROI thing in my experience. You can spend a lot of time crafting a GPT and then be like, you know what, this is not better than just using ChatGPT itself. And then other times it's phenomenal. One example for us is giving for our engagements, we have a markdown file that you can copy paste in, and everyone does that every time, or you create a GPT that knows about the engagement, that knows about the product you're working on. And then everyone uses that GPT because it already has a lot of context on the specific things you're doing in your team and your product.
That's a good point, and it also kind of points back to the point we made earlier about knowing what tools to use and when to use them. Sometimes it's a GPT, like a custom GPT that you want to use. Sometimes there's another tool that's outside of ChatGPT entirely that is more fine-tuned and better suited to the specific task you're looking for. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's just searching through the custom GPTs. Sometimes it's doing a web search to see if there's something else. Small iterative prompts. Check that the GPT understands my prompt. Yeah, lots of good answers here.
I'll
Um,
also say with the
but
small iterative prompts, that's really useful for me when I'm doing something I haven't done before. I'm like, how do I get the responses I want from the generative AI I'm using? I'm going to start with a little thing, see what it does. And then that often leads me to be able to do more contextual, larger prompts. Like, okay, I've done this before. I know exactly the 12 sentences I need to throw in here. I know the kind of context. So it can also be really useful to use the smaller prompts and a conversational style when when you're playing on something new. And that can also be really powerful once you understand how the tool you're using is functioning, to have the experience to then dump a whole large piece of context and get exactly the kind of result you're looking for and then start refining on it.
yep, absolutely. Yeah, and just like we said with other things, you'll find with use that um, not only will you find that some of these things will come back in your memory, like, oh yeah, okay, I need to do smaller prompts or prompt in this other way, and you'll find ways of prompting that you like. You may find, all of this is very new too. You may find ways that you can prompt that other people haven't suggested. You may find your own tips and tricks. Share those with others, document them for yourself, and continue to evolve them.
Folks can also feel free to drop questions in the chat or in the Q&A if y'all have questions. We'll leave the rest of the time for folks to add any other actions that you want to take immediately to get your AI usage better, stronger, harder, faster, um, and or open Q&A. So thank you for joining us today. Uh,
Yes.
Feel free to also drop if you need to go prep for a one. I'm excited to hear what other questions folks have or what other answers they have to the Slido poll here.
I want to point out too something that I've started doing recently is I put a question that I think I want to ask myself often. I put it on my calendar. So this could be a thing that you could do if you don't have something that comes to mind today. You may put this on your calendar, just block off a 10-minute block or something on your calendar and say, what can I improve on with AI with my team or my organization today? And you may find that you don't have something in mind today, but you might have something in mind next Monday or next Thursday or whatever. Um, so having a regular prompt like that can help spur those ideas too. I like that. Remind myself of data privacy practices, double down on experimentation. Thanks for the comments in chat. I appreciate that.
Also note, we didn't dig into this in detail on the risk stuff. Data privacy is a huge part of it. It's also worth noting the data privacy stuff is different for each tool and often in different contexts. So it may take not just reminding, but also researching in this context, what's private and what isn't with this tool. What am I allowed to share in this industry, in this domain? All of that can be very specific as far as what AI is doing. And sometimes we're still like the exact policy around what is and isn't private and what the private data privacy practices is sometimes still being debated and worked out.
Yeah, that's a great point. Different companies and industries have different risk profiles, and you may find that there's an evolving data privacy practice within your organization or your team. And with anything with just like with things with ChatGPT, don't take it at face value completely. Be Socratic in anything you work with like that. Ask questions. Is this policy complete? Is there something I should be adding to it? If you think there's something missing, don't be afraid to tell your organization or something that you see or read about, share it. You have a question in Q&A.
Siddharth just wanted
That's
to share. Yeah, Siddharth, we'll have our folks that do apprenticeship and internship reach out if, for any opportunities we can share. Thank you.
Yep. Mike has a note on custom GPTs. Uh, just reading through it real quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, this is interesting.
Yeah, I had a similar thing where I wanted multiple custom GPs to work together. Um,
Yeah, there and really there's a mixture of looking around. This is where the staying up to date with what's out there. So there's things that we started to create a GPT for, or like our some of our things that Joe mentioned when we started building our own AI tools, that it was useful for us to do and play with and DIY it. And then someone else built a tool that does that, whether that's making wireframes or writing features and stories. And sometimes the custom tools work great. For example, the wireframe one we weren't that impressed with. Maybe good enough for a starter wireframe that you then have a designer edit, but not good enough for game time. And so there's a mixture of things you can do with general purpose tools, like Bard or DALL-E or ChatGPT or whatever. Um, and then what you're describing here, Mike, sorry, you can make your own GPTs and string those together, as well as specific tools that do specific industry specific or role specific things. It's definitely where the AI/ML world is at for software development, is that you're going to need to create and string together a mix of those kinds of tools.
right. And there was I know previously you can string custom GPTs together to talk to each other. You can manually take the output from one and pass it to the other, but there was no automated process. But it's always evolving. It may have changed at the time I'm talking right now to actually do that. But there's other ways around it too. So, think about if it doesn't work the way you want it to, there's APIs and things that you can use, or look around the corner at what's coming in the future. If it's something that a lot of people are asking about, Chat GPT 5 might have it, um, or Google's GPT might introduce that as a feature to be competitive. So we're in a very competitive and fast moving space. There's a lot going on. It's another callback to like Paul said, being aware of the features that are coming out and always experimenting. All right. I think we're just about at time. Do we have any last minute questions or comments to throw in the chat?
Thanks for joining, everybody. It's fantastic to share this stuff with you. Grateful for comments and things you all shared as well.
Yes, it's a good point too that we are reachable on LinkedIn. If you reach out, you can find both of us on LinkedIn by searching for Integral and/or our names. And as well, we have webinars that we try and do webinars and classes pretty regularly. So watch our Eventbrite, subscribe to that, and look for future things, future talks and classes coming up. Thanks everyone for showing up.